Welcome to Harvest Church Online. We're so glad that you are watching us today. Wherever and whenever you are watching this, thank you so much for making us a part of your day. Harvest Church exists so that all people may know Jesus and grow with Him. If you would do us a favor, click that subscribe button. We would love for you to do that. And we are in the second part of our series, Making Ordinary Extraordinary, where we're trying to take ordinary things and make them extraordinary. And what I mean by that is we don't want to take and say, hey, this huge thing, this big thing is extraordinary. No, we want to emphasize the ordinary things that people do and that the Bible calls us to do and what we see the first century church do. And we want to blow that up and say that that's really extraordinary. When I was in Colorado, I was running a discipleship class, and I remember one night, everybody came, and I did not tell them we were going to do this. And I said, all right, guys, today we're going to go out and we're going to evangelize. And you should see everybody's face. Because when we talk about evangelism, we're talking about sharing God's story. We're talking about sharing the gospel to people. And they were like, oh my gosh, you didn't tell us. You should have prepped us. And I said, no, I shouldn't have prepped you, because if I had prepped you, you would not have shown up tonight. And so we spent some time in prayer before we left. And then we all went out to different parts in Colorado. And here's the thing, in our area that we lived in, there was not anything. We were very rural, so we had to drive to the next town, which was about 15 minutes down the road. Some people went to one grocery store. We went to another grocery store. And the thing that we said is that when you're going in, all we want you to do is pray and say, all right, Lord, who would you lead me to today? Is there anybody here you'd want me to share the gospel with or whatnot? And so we did that, and we came back. And what was amazing is that everybody had a story. Everybody had a story that they could tell where they felt like God led them to someone and that they were able to share why they were there. Some people were able to pray for people. And we even had two folks lead two other people to Christ that night. It was amazing. And it was really just truly unbelievable what happened. We actually got to baptize one of them in the church. So it was really cool. That is something that is very ordinary, to think about having a purpose for going someplace other than the reason that you went. And what I mean by that is, on that night, in our going, right? In our going, we were sensitive to what God was leading us to do. And so we were at the grocery store for a purpose, but not typically for the purpose that you go to a grocery store. And that's one of the ordinary things that I believe the first century church did and embodied, because it's kind of one of our taglines here, right? We want to be Acts 2:47, 24/7. And so when you read that, it says that the people of God were praising God. They had favor with the people, and God was adding to their number daily those who were being saved. And when you read that and you couple it with the mission that Jesus gives us in Matthew 28, what you begin to find out is that our walking and living out our faith isn't supposed to be confined into 1 hour per week, or if we have a Bible study or something, a couple of hours per week, that it's actually supposed to be all of the time. Actually, I have a good friend of mine who used an illustration one time in a sermon, and he said, our life as followers of Jesus are to be like pancakes, not waffles. And what he meant by that is that you can take a waffle and you can put syrup in individual compartments without the syrup touching one another. And he said, a lot of times we live our life as believers compartmentalized. We are one way at church, and we're one way at the office, and we're one way at the ball field, and we're one way on vacation, we're one way this. And he's like, no, but that's not the call of Jesus. The call of Jesus is to live our life like a pancake, where once you put the syrup on, it smears everywhere. It's the same everywhere, right? The butter gets all over the place. There's no compartmentalization. And so when we talk about giving and living our life on purpose, today's message, I think, is going to give you a purpose for going to the grocery store, a purpose for going on a walk in the neighborhood, the purpose for signing up for a ball team, and the purpose as a believer for maybe even going to work. Because what we read when Jesus gives the mission to the church before he leaves is that we're actually supposed to take the gospel with us everywhere we go. This is what he says Matthew 28, verse 16, now the 11 disciples went to Galilee to the mountain to which Jesus had directed them. And when they saw him, they worshiped him, but some doubted. And Jesus came and said to them, all authority in heaven on earth has been given to me. So he's like, look, I got all the authority. So what I'm about to say is what you need to do, right? You don't go and start a conversation with someone and say, I have the authority, unless you're about to give them a directive, right? That's not usually how you start a conversation. Mr. Dennis is, behind the camera here. I don't go to him and say, hey, I have the authority, Mr. Dennis. Let's go get chocolate ice cream. That's not how we talk, right? Unless, which he would love to go do that. Unless we're trying to tell somebody and give somebody a directive and say, but I'm the authority figure and this is what you're supposed to do. Verse 19, go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to observe all that I've commanded you. And behold, I am with you always to the ends of the age. Now, if you have been in church for a long time, you know this as the Great Commission. I like to say it's the Great Mission, because I think it's what Jesus gave us the thing to do. It's like what we talked about last week, right? Like the ecclesia of Jesus is a people on a mission. The assembly of Jesus are a people on a mission. But in this can be lost in this idea of like, go and make disciples. This idea that we go, what that's translated is in your going. Meaning as you go about your day, in your regularly scheduled things that you do, going to work, going to the baseball field for a practice or a game, going on vacation, going to the grocery store, running to a hardware store, whatever it may be, that the call of the mission of the church is that in our going, we take the gospel with us, which means that we're going to work, yes, to have a paycheck, but as a believer, we actually have a higher purpose for going to work. It's what? To share the gospel and make disciples. Yes, we're going to the grocery store and walking through this painstaking experience, right? That we're going through at the grocery store and looking for things. But as a believer, what this mission says is that, yeah, you're going to the store to get bread and milk and whatever else you're getting. And yet you're also going for a greater purpose, right? In your going, take the gospel with you. Yes, you have a kid playing baseball or basketball or football, and that's fun. And you're going to the ballpark or the recreation center or the field to do that. But what the call of Jesus is that in your going, you might be going to play football, but as a believer, your purpose is to go and make disciples. Not only by what you say, but also how you carry yourself. And so when we see this and we couple it with Acts 2:47, what we see is that the first century church took Jesus' command and his mission very seriously, because as they went out, they were praising God, not just for the hour a week, not just when they went to Bible study, but they were praising God all the time. They were thankful to the Lord all the time. They were joyful all the time. Even in trials, they were doing that. And they had favor with the people, meaning they had good relationships with people, and God was adding to their number daily those who were being saved. And so when we think about this idea of taking something ordinary and making it extraordinary, we have to go back to this mission. And we have to go back to thinking about how the first century church did it and what it looks like for us. When we were in Europe, and one of the reasons I wanted to do this series was because I saw so many commonalities with the way harvest is made and created and the outworking of it and what ministry in Europe. They're a post-Christian society. People are indifferent. So they're not having big events and getting people. They're actually having to do it, get people to come to church through personal invites and social networks. And when we talk about social networks, what we're talking about is our friends and our relatives. We're talking about acquaintances. We're talking about coworkers. We're talking about our neighbors. We're talking about even some of our enemies. We're talking about strangers. That's the social network. It's actually an acronym called Francis. And so we're talking about that in Europe, what we're seeing is that the majority of people are coming to Christ and are being connected to the church through people's social networks, meaning a person teaching school has good relationships with other teachers and invites them to come to church with them. A person that works in construction has great relationships with people working in construction, invites them to church, and they come with them. Meaning their neighbors have a good relationship and they begin to invite their neighbors. That's how they do it. Well, what we find in studying how the gospel gets translated throughout multiple cultures over multiple years, what we find is that 57% of people come to know Jesus through social networks, meaning their friends, relatives, acquaintances, neighbors, co-workers, enemies, and strangers. In fact, one of the reasons I wanted to highlight this is because when we look at Harvest, we've had 55 salvations so far, and the vast majority of them have happened in the neighborhood. The vast majority of them have happened with someone texting me, hey, while we were serving at this house today, while we were serving food, right, to underprivileged people, I was able to lead a man to Christ today. Hey, while we were having this Bible study in a recovery home, I was able to lead 2 or 3 people to Christ today. Hey, while I was looking at my Bible study or doing my Bible study, somebody new came that was connected with a friend that was part of my Bible study, and they came to Christ today. Hey, we were able to pray for someone as we were serving Thanksgiving dinner, and a man came looking for an AA meeting that was canceled and came into our dinner, and we were able to pray with him, and he received Christ today. That literally Harvest Church has embodied what I believe Jesus is talking about and what we see in Acts. And those are just very ordinary things. But in the reality of things, when it comes to eternity, they're extraordinary. Fathers leading their children to Christ as they have come to Christ, right? So the purpose in making ordinary extraordinary is I just want to highlight this is what we're seeing overseas, but this is what we're seeing at Harvest. And in fact, it's a very impactful strategy for how we reach people, because here's what we know. Statistically, there's about 60% of the community that no matter how great our church is, no matter how amazing our music is, no matter how amazing the sermon is, no matter what it looks like, they're not coming through the doors of our church. And so part of the mission of Jesus and what we see in Acts is a decentralized version of ministry where we empower and equip our people to carry the gospel with them in their going, in their daily activities, to reach people that we would never even know existed because they're in their social network and they meet with them day in and day out. So here's a practical thing that can help you start on this mission and on this journey. And it really is the acronym Francis. It's one letter for every day of the week. And so here's my encouragement and my challenge to you. Get you a journal or a note on your phone and write out Francis. Friends, relatives, acquaintances, neighbors, co-workers, enemies, and strangers. And take one of those letters for every single day of the week and begin to sow into prayer. You might have names to add to that list. You might not have names, but begin to pray on Mondays and say, God, lead me to my friends. What friends would be receptive to the gospel? Help me be an example of Jesus to my friends. And then the next day, my relatives. God, how can I be an example to my relatives of your goodness? And how can I have an opportunity to share the gospel with them? And start going and praying and sowing in prayer through each of those things. And I guarantee you, that over time, God is going to lead you to have gospel conversations with those folks in your social network. And you're going to see how God uses your testimony and uses your story to convey His love for them. And you will be surprised at how many people become receptive to the gospel just because they see you, they know you, and in your going, in your normal everyday going, you are sharing the gospel. So that's the challenge. Adopt Francis. Begin to pray through those things and see how God uses it to expand His kingdom, and see how God uses it to grow you even closer to Him and use your life as an impact to others. I promise you, you'll be surprised at what happens. So the church, the ecclesia of Jesus, is a people on a mission. and they were people on a mission as they went. They carried the gospel with them through their social networks. That was a call for them then. That's a call for us now. God bless you.